People who are with us with the opening plenary, welcome back. To everyone that is online, good afternoon. Welcome to the Science, Business, Green Deal and Climate Days. Specifically for this session, the focus, in case you did not know yet, is net zero in the city. So we're going to be discussing with a panel of very cool people, if you allow me to say so, about driving the urban transition to, let's say, more climate neutral, more sustainable cities. And I am very, very honored to welcome all my speakers here today. We had a couple of defections, but that should not prevent us from moving forward with what I think will be a very, very interesting roundtable. So you see everyone in the room, but also I would like to introduce Stanley from the city of Chuane, who is joining us online. So thank you very much for making the time to be here with us today. A couple of house rules also for our speakers. When you want to take the word, please push on the button on your mic. When you're done with your intervention, push again so that we can keep the cameras also moving flawlessly between all of you. When you have a question or a comment, please raise your nameplate so that I know who to call on exactly, and I will then give you the floor. This is a roundtable, so I would really like to keep it as a very nice, free-flowing discussion, but there will be a couple of introductory remarks. So I'm very, very glad to introduce Mr. Philippe Froissart from the European Commission, DG RTD, and Ms. Paloma Garrote from CINEA. To all the speakers, I will refer to you by first name. Please tell me if you're not comfortable with that, but otherwise I will call on you by that. Of course, when you're called upon to comment, please also state your organization and your position so that everyone knows exactly who they're talking to. To the public, there might be space for Q&A towards the end of the session, but for the time being, we will keep it between our speakers around the table. That should be okay. So to begin with, please, Philippe, I would like to call on you to explain us maybe a little bit more in depth, because I'm sure everyone in the room knows about the city's mission, but what is exactly the city's mission doing? Mainly, what are we going to see from the city's mission in the upcoming period? And what would be some lessons or best practices that you would highlight from the previous years?
Thank you very much, Raffaele, and good afternoon, everyone. So, as you said, my name is Philippe Froissart, working for DG Research and Innovation, and I am managing the Secretariat of the Climate Neutral and Smart Cities Mission, which is the official long title for what we usually call the Cities Mission. It's one of the 5 missions that was launched in Horizon Europe. And I think this mission, together with some of the other missions, echo extremely well what we have as an objective in Europe, which was spelled out in the Green Deal communication, which is to have Europe as a continent climate neutral by 2050. So in the context of the mission, the cities mission, we were even more ambitious. We wanted to have cities climate neutral by 2030. And we wanted really that because the idea was to use cities as experimentation hub to test new solutions in urban environment, to deploy these solutions to reach climate neutrality at an early date than 2050, 2030, as I said, and to show the way to all the other cities in Europe so that they could become climate neutral in turn by 2050. So how did we go about that? We launched the mission in 2019, and by 2022, we actually selected 100 cities from European member states and 12 cities from associated countries, which had indicated their commitment to become climate neutral by 2030. So this is not a mean commitment. This is actually something which is very difficult, very hard to achieve. And what we wanted to do through this selection of cities was to select the pioneering cities that we would be eventually using in Europe to show the way to other cities so that they could also develop their strategy for climate neutrality. So what do we do concretely with those cities? Well, we are helping them develop what we call the climate city contract. which is a document which is composed of 3 parts. One part where you have commitments from the local authorities, from the stakeholders, which can be public and private, in achieving the objective of climate neutrality by 2030. We have a second part, which is the action plan, where the cities describe what are the activities that they will put in place to reduce their emission of greenhouse gases. So that starts with an inventory of greenhouse gases, needless to say. And this is something that will be used as the starting point for them to put in place the actions that will reduce the greenhouse gases. Then we have something which is new in many cases for this type of activities and initiatives at European level. We want them also to develop an investment plan. And the investment plan will actually be the budget, the resources that they need to have in place, the investments that they need to have in place in order to implement their action plan. I'm saying that it's new because very often what we restrict ourselves to is the development of the action plan, the actions that need to be put in place, but we don't necessarily link that with budget and investment. And that's really the hardest part for the cities. So what we have done is we have invited cities, we have provided cities with services that are given by what we call the mission platform, which is managed by a project called Net Zero Cities. And this mission platform has identified city advisors, and those city advisors work very closely with a subgroup of cities among the 112 cities that we have in the mission to help them develop their climate city contract. And if I can indicate maybe some lessons learned from the first experience that we have had, we have already a first batch of cities that have prepared and submitted their climate city contract, 12 of them, and we are presently reviewing these climate city contracts, that means the action plan and the investment plan. And this is a very valuable exercise because we see the difficulty that most of the cities have in preparing these documents. For instance, when it comes to the action plan, it's quite tricky for most cities, including cities that are frontrunners, to have a comprehensive analysis of where the greenhouse gases come from, particularly when it comes to the contribution from industry. Because we should not restrict ourselves to the emissions that come from, let's say, public buildings or public transport and so on. We need also to take into account all the emissions. And that is something that is quite difficult to do by the local authorities. And the other part that is also very difficult that we have seen in quite many of the investment plans that we have received is a proper estimation of, in particularly, the contribution from the private sector. Because it goes without saying that this strategy for climate neutrality cannot be achieved only through public funding. We need investment from private sector. I mean, just to give you an example, when you will change your car from a diesel engine to an electric vehicle, that is your money. So you are contributing to the implementation of the action plan. You may receive subsidies from the state or from local authorities for changing that car, but the bulk of the investment comes from yourself. When you want to renovate your apartment or your house and increase the energy efficiency of your building, of your house, of your apartment, again, it is your money. So you are contributing to it. But the evaluation of that contribution is something that is very difficult to do by the local authorities. And we are putting in place a number of elements and services that will help them do that. We are starting with the mission platform in developing also what we call the capital hub, which will bring together the investors and the cities in identifying resources that they can use for supporting their investment plan. And this is just the beginning of a process, but I should say that we are running against the time because 2030 is tomorrow, and the implementation of those strategies will take not only time and resources, and it will be very difficult, needless to say, to have these cities reaching climate neutrality, but at least so far we have their commitment. So it's very positive, and we also, from our side, from the Commission side, we are putting forward a number of resources. I mentioned the mission platform, but there are also a number of other elements that we have at our disposal to help them develop and implement their strategy. I think that's all I wanted to say from my side to start with. I'm sure I will have the opportunity to say a little bit more in the course of this session.
Thank you very much. I'm sure also everyone will have comments to what you have just said. Before giving, let's say, the floor to everyone else, I would maybe like to switch to Paloma here to my right. Thank you very much for coming in today. You're the director of CINEA. So The city's mission, it's quite new, I would say, but CINEA has been working on European projects and also with cities already for a very long time. So what are some insights or some ideas that CINEA has gained through the work done with cities on previous projects at the European level?
Well, thank you, Raffaele, and good afternoon to everybody. So, indeed, CINEA is, for those who do not know us so well, CINEA is the agency who is in charge of the programs of the European Union which have a link with the European Green Deal, whether in environment, climate, energy, transport, and therefore, that's why cities who represent 70% of the population of the European Union and also are supposed to, be responsible for 23% of the greenhouse emissions from transport is also something which is in the heart of our work. We work, of course, closely with the European Commission, and in the agency, I can see, not only the research programs, which are all very important, but also programs which are financing more the deployment. And here we are talking about the LIFE program or the Connecting Europe facility, for example, in transport. And these are programs which will be able in the future to take up some of the innovations that they have been tested and piloted in the research programs. For us, is very important. As an example, I would say that in Horizon, we have worked, with many stakeholders in all these projects where we are talking about engineering, construction companies, cities, national authorities, ONGs, to try to make, the stakeholders wider. This will help us that in the future, all the solutions that these projects are able to test or demonstrate in a small scale are deployed further away. And that's very important. For example, we have the Civitas initiative. This is a platform for exchange of best practice between the different cities and stakeholders, where other cities can be able to learn from the innovative elements that other stakeholders have brought, and they will be able to then learn and replicate. They also, these platforms help to enhance local governments and adapt their measures to their own cities. And at the end, we have a kind of living labs where all these solutions are being tested and give us, a more integrated and inclusive approach to transport, and also, ensure a high quality of the urban space. And we have also similar initiatives, for example, in the case of energy efficiency. But as I said, we cannot keep everything on innovation. I mean, we have to continue beyond. And as Philippe said, we need also the involvement of, more cities. We also need the involvement of more private sector, also the involvement maybe also of national funds to be able to reach the net zero cities. On our side, as I said, the agency is been managing other programs. For example, in the LIFE program, we have a specific topic by which we have until now financed around more than 400 projects in 300 cities. And we are talking about a modest amount, but still 350 million. And these are measures, whether we are talking about energy efficiency, whether we are talking about air and water pollution, or even transport measures. So we are trying always to find, how we can scale up the solutions of innovation, but also how we can make complementaries. And this is specific, for example, a couple of examples of two projects which are Scale Up and Move 21. These, for example, are projects that they have been developing urban nodes in the Trans-European Network for Transport. This is a specific area where our Connecting Europe facility is providing financing. And we can complement measures. You know, for example, the Connecting Europe facility is doing links between, for example, the airport and a port in town in a green way, and this is what we finance. We finance rail, for example, or we finance measures on the ports, and then we come with other programs, and this can maximize the impact. So that's what the agency is always trying to do, look at different problems from different perspectives and how we can, you know, complement with the different funding, the different initiatives. So just to summarize, because, you know, I know that everybody, you know, I'm thinking a little bit, you know, the importance that the stakeholders work together, the importance that not only, you know, we cannot rely on the European Union funding. It will not be enough to fund all the budget for having net zero cities. We have, I mean, the Commission has their initiatives, but there is an importance to have all the stakeholders together in this journey. And as, you know, I think that an architecture critic said, you know, urbanism works when the journey is as beautiful as the destination. And so I hope that together we can work together in this beautiful journey to make a net zero city a success.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's a very nice message to conclude the intervention with. Now, we have heard, thank you very much to both of you. We have heard what the European Union is doing, but when we talk about cities, we're talking about very different entities. I mean, cities in Europe, they're not all the same. They come in different sizes, different shape, different climates, different population. So when we see this big difference between cities, how can we think of a good strategy to make sure that that all cities will reach net zero? I mean, the question here, the fundamental question here is there a one-size-fits-all policy that we can apply to cities, or cities have to recognize their differences and work on those differences to make them strengths? So here I open the floor to all of the participants in this roundtable, and if you have comments or questions even about what you've heard, please, the floor is yours. And I will start with Gareth.
Hello, Gareth Macnaughton from EIT Urban Mobility. So we get the joy of both working with Civitas and on the Net Zero City project, and we get to see lots of this cross-collaboration. And it is, after over 20 years of working in Commission, it's nice to see that level of cooperation. Okay, so there is a change. I think maybe the need has pushed that, but we work with lots of cities. And I don't necessarily think it's not a one-size-fits-all, but there are common principles. And I think that's what we're trying to do when we work with the cities. You know, we want less cars in the city centre. That's a common. Now, how you get there in Prague compared to Barcelona is different. If you have a town of 50,000 people, you're never going to attract a micro-mobility provider. You're going to have to come up with another way to do that. But there are basic principles, whether it's energy, whether it's waste collection, and sharing those and allowing the people to localize it is really helping them. I sometimes think we can disempower them with the size of the challenge. And when you break it down to the principles and say, what can you do now? And we're very pro 6 to 12 months. What can you do from that energy agenda? What could we do with you now? Let's start with that. And it gives them a little bit more confidence in short-term successes. And you can see the happiness of the city workers when they've done something to close off some streets and give over a park, or turn around and put in a special support for digital transport technology so that we have demand responsive for people that need it. And I think that as long as we get the principles right and we can all agree on them, I think we can do a lot. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Holger, I think you were second in line, so please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Raphael, actually also for inviting me, and Philippe and Paloma for their starting off the discussion. I think that's very helpful also to get us going. ICLEI is a city network, and potentially I am the one here representing the stakeholder that is in question. ICLEI is also as an organization that is very much engaged in both policy but also research and innovation activities, partner in the Net Zero Cities project, and also in a few other mission-related projects. By the way, not just for the cities mission that was sort of put on the table, but also the mission for climate adaptation, which I believe must not be forgotten, because if we work on climate action, then usually the investment goes in infrastructure projects or other projects that pay into the accounts both of the climate mitigation and the climate adaptation part. So I think it is very much a city thing, if you wish so, or a city perspective to look at the investment or the development of infrastructure and city systems in an integrated manner. If you ask Raphael, is there a universal blueprint for net zero cities? I'm afraid we need to say no, there is none, because of the diversity of cities. Of course, we have a colleague here from Chuana, and we talk here about an EU cities mission. I believe that it will already be quite a difficult pathway to arrive at a common understanding of what the issue is for the 112 cities and the 256 cities that have not been selected, and the other almost 80,000 cities and subnational governments that we have in the European Union, not to be spoken about the international cities. So we have here an issue of both pace and scale if we want to be realistic about our ambition, but also still not to neglect that we have to transform. I believe that we look here at an unprecedented transformational challenge for cities. And if we talk about these cities, we talk actually about a multitude of stakeholders inside the cities. Let's just focus on a few. There are the schools, there are the hospitals, there are the mobility providers, service providers, there might be water services, there is a multitude of private actors in cities. So we, first of all, talking about collaboration, obviously need to bring those together, but these actors need to identify themselves in different roles. Part of this challenge is that our understanding for collaboration is also that we need to take a different perspective on what collaboration should mean. A researcher potentially needs to find himself or herself in a different way to respond to the challenge, not going by the interest of the researcher, but the interest of the transformational challenge that is at stake. So what we, though, try out in Net Zero Cities, and here I think the mission and the mission projects are very, very important, is to help understand what is the challenge, but also determine methodologies that help us to embark on processes in an aligned manner, and also establish communication patterns that help to understand what are we talking about and develop a common language of the issue. So here I believe the mission and the mission projects are an important way actually to connect the policy ambition and the implementation perspective, as well as the understanding of what innovation is needed in terms of governance, services, policies, but also financing. Philip has discussed the issue of financing, but also, of course, what is not available and still needs to be developed. To give you an example of this one, Philip has embarked on the question of the private financing, which is definitely an important element. but it is non-sufficient because there's also a public investment needed, and we need to reorganize and reorientate the public budgets as well. We also need to bring private and public together. At the end of the day, we talk about democratic organizations, at least in the European Union. Cities are organizations that are being held accountable for their investment. So they cannot just leave the investment to the private sector without a democratic control, transparency, governance. So we need to obviously also find ways in order to ensure that the policy actors can perform according to their mandate and according to their role. So I think we have a couple of issues here. Potentially we need to come to different financing facilities that help to bring the public and private together. I will be happy to talk more about that, but not in my opening intervention here. Second, we also need to bring community crowdsourcing into the picture. There is a multitude of experiences that we have, for example, with energy communities, and this might be an important way actually to bring the community sphere also into the implementation of the action plans and have their share in the commitment part, which is the Climate City contract. Here, we also understand that in this very moment, there is obviously some frictions in our societies. Not everyone is happy with the large-scale investment in public infrastructure coming from the private sector. So we might need to find different ways actually to also bring community actors into financing as an important element. I stop here. There is more to say, but I want to leave others the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, Rachel, you are next in line, so please.
Thanks so much. And I definitely agree with my fellow Roundtable people. And Holger, just to pick up on your point, I think one of the things we haven't really touched on is the fact that we need to turn the public's idea of needing to get to net zero to wanting to get to net zero. And that is a huge issue. I'm from Elsevier, we're a big publisher, but we're also a data analytics company. And what we've done is to map research to the Sustainable Development Goals, one of which, SDG number 11, is sustainable cities. And what's interesting, if you look at the research output, most of it's in engineering. Over 125,000 papers have been related to engineering and less than 25 to psychology. Now, I had a very interesting trip to the University of Delft, and I had a look at their sustainable cities, and they showed me an amazing technological invention. And it was about, basically putting another false facade on your house. It was really ugly. And they said not one person wanted this technology. No one wanted to scale it up because no one wants to put that on their front of their 19th century house in Amsterdam, right? So we have this idea that we've got technology, it can be scaled, but we need some real innovation there. And I think that's really important, is that this isn't a binary pathway from 1 to the 0. It is definitely going to be about setting a destination, and I applaud the EU missions 2030. As somebody who's trying to decarbonise my own business, 2040, I look at 2030 and think, yes, let's go. That's ambitious, and I think it's definitely worth going for. And I think what we need is the ideas and the pathways to do it. And I think research and innovation is going to play a massive role. And there what we see is what we call knowledge economy. Universities have a symbiotic relationship with the cities. Not only do they just, occupy the office spaces around, but they generate students to come in, that they occupy the transport. They play a major, major role. And at Elsevier, we've done a couple of reports at Amsterdam, and we also looked at Oxfordshire, for example, to look at knowledge economy. And what we found there is that you can lead into the strengths, because not only do we need to get to net zero, but cities also need to generate more jobs. They need to have an amazing cultural program. They need to be attracting great people to make it a city that you want to live in. And so there, what we really see is that these knowledge economies are looking at making sure cities are competitive, that they're leaning into those strengths. So for example, in the Amsterdam report, we found that Amsterdam had, or the region around Amsterdam, a really strong strength in life sciences. but none of the life sciences startups were located in Amsterdam. And so suddenly you open a dialogue where, hey, why aren't they coming to Amsterdam? Why aren't they generating reports? Because we know academic and corporation collaboration is one of those pathways to R&D and to scaling up some of these technologies. And quite frankly, you have to be co-located. You know, they need to be close. We need to be making sure that researchers know that there's job opportunities in private businesses, and to develop those connections both personally and on a corporate level. And so what we really find is that knowledge economy might be a really great way of figuring out what the strengths are, where to play, and certainly in trying to think about that net zero cities mission as well.
Thank you very much. Ted, I think you are next in line, so please, from Amsterdam, exactly.
Thank you, and thank you for all the comments from my fellow roundtable guests. And I would like to respond to Holger and both Rachel, because she gave a nice plea for Amsterdam as a knowledge economy, and we're working quite hard on becoming so. Just to tie in on the discussion, what I do see is that no, there is no one blueprint for all the 100 European cities to become climate neutral. They all have their own challenges, characteristics, but there are indeed common principles and common methodologies we can work along. And there the universities of applied sciences come in, I guess, because they are the actors that can transfer these methodologies and these common principles, not only within a city, but also across cities. For example, in the Netherlands, we're working hard on doing so. The 7 cities that are associated with the city's mission that are located in the Netherlands, we're now trying to team up and make these common principles and methodologies, but also from an international perspective, cooperating with fellow cities and universities, universities of applied sciences within other cities to exchange. And there I would also like to make, well, 2 pledges, basically. The first one is on the knowledge economy. So in Amsterdam, for example, we're working quite hard on building this knowledge and innovation ecosystem, combining indeed science from a theoretical side, from a practical side, but also from a very hands-on perspective, those technicians out in the street, with the corporates, the businesses, the small enterprises, the large enterprises, the international ones, not only just to keep our people in the cities where we need them, but also make this shift towards net zero. And that also drives me to the second point, that it's not just about technology. It's about a lot of other points apart from technology that is making this shift possible. And we already heard about, economics, finance, a nice ecosystem to live in, housing opportunities for those who have to live and work in a city. But it's also about the legal frameworks that allow cities to make this shift, and indeed the social and psychological science that allows people to embrace the shift to net zero. And a last thing I would like to bring forward here is that I think that especially the universities of applied science can make an important bit in this whole enterprise. Because we as universities of applied science, we usually serve or act as a knowledge broker between theory and practice, and we are used to listen. We're used to listen to those out in the streets that have certain issues, that have certain challenges, and we're able to make the transition between theory and practice, and thereby providing actionable science, but also helping those who develop the theoretical science to do that in the right direction, to make sure that basically that the science that is being developed and that where effort is being spent in, that's in the right direction. So that's just a few notes from my side.
Thank you very much. Markus, I think.
Yeah, thank you and good afternoon as well. I'm from Fraunhofer, I'm from the Institute of Manufacturing, Engineering, Automation. You can ask, what has this to do with urban spaces, for sure? But let me just introduce a little bit. We are busy with a concept called ultra-efficiency for about 10 years in the industry. And last year, we started to transfer this concept on the neighborhood in the city, nearby next to Stuttgart, or a small town called Fellbach. And we made, of course, some experience when we talked to authorities, association, industrial association, and other stuff. I will talk about it in a couple of sentences. But first, let me go back just to explain a bit about sustainability, because to achieve the goal of a net zero city, we have to take in consideration all ways that we have to force sustainability. It's not only efficiency. Everybody's talking about resource efficiency and that. It's also something different. For example, consistency is more about technologies. Nowadays, we are talking a lot about hydrogen or bioreactors for waste that we can produce, or clear water or something like that. But also, one part is sufficiency, for example. And yet, for sure, all the companies don't want to reduce their production program. But what means in this context sufficiency? It's about sharing. Yeah? But that's coming back to the urban spaces, and maybe a little bit of about the results of our potential analysis we done about a year, is that there are still great barriers, yeah, in the mindset of everybody. Yeah. We have also some challenges with the timeline, the time scale to implement to special things, and we have still a lot to do, some blockades even with the legal part. And that's make it so complicated. When we are talking to the industry, a lot of people are interested to do something. But finally, first of all, they are looking to themselves, what is my benefit, and not what is the benefit of the total society. But the main goal is that what Ted and other of you already said, in urban spaces, we want to have living, housing, and working close together. And nobody wants have a disadvantage. Nobody wants to have more traffic, for example. Yeah, everybody's talking actually about getting out the cars of the city, the transport also out of the city. So we have to think also about our circular economy in very close and nearby cycles, for example. And therefore, there are some interesting experience we made. For example, in this case, we have also some urban farmers. And there are already concepts like using fruit and vegetable growing for local restaurants, for canteens, and the social aspect of sustainability, for example, sharing lounges, yeah, sharing spaces, something like that. But on the other hand, the question is, whom belongs these spaces? And they have still this blockade in the mind, and that they have dependencies on after it if they share something to others. That's one of the barriers. When we talk to them, everybody's looking for them, not for the win-win of everybody. On the other side, there are some more things like the local authorities. If you are talking to the building authority, yeah, for example, if you need a new pipe for using rainwater through the city, yeah, then we are talking about years of planning and years of realization. So we have cubic meters. We've calculated as for this town. We have cubic meters of really rainwater which could be used, but we don't have a good transportation situation. First of all, we need a pipe on the one hand side. The alternative is that what I mentioned before. we could carry or transport this rainwater with trucks to the other side. But that's totally different to what we say. We don't want to get the transport, the traffic out of the city. So we have interactions with all of these fields, and this is something that makes it very, very complicated. And we feel these gaps when we are talking to all the actors, the companies, the cities, the authorities, everybody. And I'm also with you. It's not possible to have a blueprint for each city. Yeah? Everything is very individual. Some have farmers, others doesn't. Yeah? But what we see, what we next want working on is to develop some models of it concerning the timeline, concerning the legal situation, yeah? So that you have special blocks, yeah? Putting together to transfer it to other situations, to other neighborhoods.
Thank you very much. David, next in line, please.
Thank you. David Holden from CINEA in France. CINEA is a large research and development organization. We deal with national problems as well as city problems. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. My role is coordination of European programs, which means interfacing with the Commission quite a bit, working on technology roadmaps, hopefully also implementation roadmaps for different technologies. We're quite active in trying to, let's say, provide enough information to the Commission actors so that they can make the right decisions. Even though, as we know, in innovation, the solutions that come about are not always the ones that we plan, especially when you start talking about, for example, things that happen in cities where citizens have to basically accept the technology or the application, let's say. And this is not always a straightforward kind of an equation. Most, I would say, engineers maybe have a bit of a problem with that, but I'm an engineer, so we're not going to go there. So what we do at CINEA is we basically develop technologies. We develop the basic building blocks where you can create new solutions and test them. We transfer this to usually to, well, for national reasons, for national needs, to industry particularly. I'm in the technology division, so we're dealing mostly with industry, but more and more with cities as well. And I would say that one of the things, as we mentioned, that not all cities are the same. And we see this, we have sites in different cities in France. We have sites in Paris. And Paris is not the same as where I come from in Grenoble. Because Grenoble is, I would say it's a little bit easier to deal with. It's a smaller city. So we're able to maybe test things that at a level that's maybe a little bit less risky than trying to implement something in Paris. One of the things that I find very enjoyable about working at CINEA is we have a lot of experts who have very strong opinions about technology, and we have internal debates where people get quite excited about defending their opinions and debating what technology solution is the best and why, why should we not put in battery storage at home? Why should we try to rely more on the battery, which is in an electric vehicle, as the means of storage for at least the short-term storage? These are the kinds of issues that come up. And these experts, they also become very, I would say, emotionally involved in their research and trying to find solutions for their own cities. And so in Grenoble, we've worked with the city to come up with different projects. For example, the car sharing, we went through, I think, 3 iterations before we finally found one that really worked and was acceptable to the citizens, and that's, I think, an important thing to put forward. We've made what we considered was a prototype of a net zero apartment building with a construction company, who's unfortunately not here today, but well-known construction company. And this allows us to, on a full scale, on a building scale, really test different technologies and see, do they live up to their the requirements of I would say, the specifications that are put forward. Is it really net zero? And one of the things along that line is, I would say, if there's something that's, I would say, a little bit annoying, is when you have architects who make buildings that are supposed to comply to certain standards, and then a year later you find that, well, finally this building doesn't comply to the standards. It would be nice to have some kind of a, I don't know, a method of having some kind of a reserve where the construction companies and the architects would only get paid if they really do the job they were set out to do. But yeah, so we're very heavily involved also in all types of measurement. It's, in order to see progress, you have to be able to measure. It's one of the things, as an engineer, the first thing you learn is if you can't measure it, you can't solve the problem. And so we've put in place a lot of, I would say, pollution measurement, all different types of measurement, and that allows us to see the effects, because now we have quite a fewer number of pollution days in Grenoble where traffic is restricted. That goes down every year for the past practically 15 years now. And without being able to measure that, you don't really see the progress you're making. And then the final point is also these passionate, I would say, researchers are actually active in making startups as well. And this is where a lot of I would say, the driver for innovation today in a city setting is coming from startup companies a lot of times, because they're willing to make, let's say, take some risks and try out new ideas which sometimes seem a little bit off the wall, but many times they'll come through. We have something which would be considered maybe for many a bit off the wall would be we have startups with these small modular reactors that are looking to do urban heating systems, so district heating, using something that would be similar to a reactor that comes out of a submarine, so to speak. But these are all things that need to be tried and tested, and if you don't try it, you won't know. So.
Thank you very much. I see that, Antonio, you had raised your hand.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, thank you very much to be here. I'm very glad. And I'm a university professor. I'm an environmental chemist, environmental risk assessor, involved in many European projects, and so on. So I'm starting from the fact that, especially based on the experience we have in Venice, we need definitely to start more and more to share the future. And to share the future in a quantitative way means to engage, first of all, the key stakeholders at the local scale. So I'm speaking about local to regional scale. How to share the future. The future will change quite remarkably our daily life, the infrastructures, the ecosystems, and ultimately the support of our daily life. So is it possible to promote, by using the best universities and higher education institutes can provide, in an exercise systematically organized with the local public and private stakeholders, authorities, city planners, and so on. According to the experience we have in Venice, this is becoming more and more urgent. We need to plan now what is going in terms of infrastructures to be implemented in the second half of this century. And according to the Italian situation, in order to decide and then to implement ambitious infrastructures, it takes some decades. So we need to know what is going to happen to use as much as possible the powerful tools provided by the different models climatic models, social and economic models. So we need to integrate sustainability in terms, first of all, of reliable scenarios, and how these reliable scenarios will develop over the time. And of course, the timing, the tools, and the benefits resulting from this public engagement must be shared. And so we need to understand how to share and how to undertake in a systematic, strongly committed way such an exercise. The experience of Venice during this, let's say, after the COVID, the post-COVID Venice experience is showing more and more the need to undertake this way of developing our common future.
Thank you very much. I will then call on Denis, and then I would suggest to Truane online to prepare them, because I would also like to get a perspective from outside of Europe, so to get some geographically also different ideas on what net zero in cities and what research can do to help that. But Denis first, please.
Thank you. So my name is Denis. I work for Veolia. We are the global leader in environmental services. So providing, actually cities are, historically actually the company was created 170 years ago to operate the drinking water system of the city of Lyon. So we are celebrating our anniversary this year. And so we work with both municipalities and industries. And we are, at the forefront of operating urban networks or providing urban services. As said, drinking water, wastewater, waste management, and also district heating, also energy services to buildings. So clearly we have this very long dialogue with cities. And to the question, does it exist a universal blueprint? For me, the answer is very simple, no. Because just if I look at our services, we don't produce drinking water the same way in Barcelona than in Helsinki. It's as simple as that. You don't collect waste the same way in Brussels than in the coastal region, in the mountain region, so you always need to adapt to the local specificities. Just some comments, because I don't want to take too much time. Just to echo what was said already, indeed, public-private partnership are a good tool. We need to be careful about the governance, because the governance needs to remain in the hands of the public authority. But it's an innovative and proven tool, especially in a period where municipal budgets are very constrained. We need to embark the citizens in this net zero race, because if you listen today to the radio, the TV, we are only asking efforts to the citizens. You need to consume less energy. You cannot take your diesel engine anymore. You need to put your heater on 19 degrees. It's only efforts. So we need to find a way to make this transition. My CEO, she said we need to make the transformation appealing, you know. And we need also to make a lot of education to citizens that all this will improve their quality of life. We all love so much our European cities. We are gifted to have all these wonderful cities in Europe. You know, this part of our cultural heritage. But we have this change needs to bring an improvement, not degrade the life of citizens. And I think it's important. And I think the challenge that most cities are facing also is that we have this transition towards net zero, but at the same time, we have, in parallel, there is more and more urbanization, you know? So at the same time, you need to reduce, you need to make energy savings, water savings, but with a growing population. So it's really a major challenge. And of course, we have many solutions that are technology-based. But I think we should also look at what has been done in the past by our ancestors sometime. So I'm not talking, well, of course you have the Roman aqueducts, but I mean, but the other day on French TV, they were showing a very smart irrigation system in the south of France. It's the region called Camargue. And it was a canal that was dug in the 18th century. And which is deflection of the river. And based on that, they managed to go through a very water-scarce summer without running out of water. So, you know, and it's use zero energy. It's really just irrigation, you know. You open, you close, and you flood the fields. So it's very impressive. But again, it works in this part of France, but not in all parts of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denis. So Stanley, please, if you would like to join us for the conversation, what would be your point of view from a non-European city, and especially given the fact that you work very closely with research? What would you say after hearing everything that was said so far? How much does it resonate with your own experience, and what would instead be the things that you see different, or that maybe we have not mentioned but that are very close to your job and your city?
Thank you so much, Rafael. Very interesting conversation, collective wisdom, which is incredibly amazing. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences from the global north. Of course, it cannot be one size fits all. For us in the global south, of course, the issues of socio-economic challenges has been an issue for a very long time. And of course, South Africa, for example, the historical injustice of apartheid, for example, has created urban areas that are actually urbanizing poverty. For example, the growth of slums in urban areas, which poses then significant challenges to municipalities to provide the basics that are constitutionally mandated, for example, water, energy, and refuse collection. When it comes to decarbonization, for example, South Africa, I'll take the energy lens. The challenges of the national utility, ESCOM, for example, which provides over 70% of the energy in Africa, have been well documented from 2007, for example, whereby now the government has opened up space in terms of energy. So the municipalities locally are able to procure from independent power producers with a program set up by the Development Bank, of course, with innovative finance to say, how do we then probably decarbonize the urban environments? By the way, I'm doing a PhD at the University of Pretoria on energy transition and climate. And through that, the engagements I've had with professors, university academic lecturers, has pointed to the fact that the demise, for example, of ESCOM has provided that opportunity. For example, we make assumptions that we are transitioning from a sustainable world, which is not the case. Obviously, those assumptions have been tested and they've proven not to work. For Tshwane, for example, is the city, just to bring it home. We no longer probably have enough collection from energy cells. It can't fund all the developmental mandates of the city. Those revenue models have been threatened. And of course, people have decided to default your customers. And through that, of course, the government has opened up that space to check if there are models that can be probably leveraged off through development finance internationally and locally. And of course, with the help of our friends from ICLE, for example, C40 Climate Leadership Group, clinging on the Paris Agreement, how do we decarbonize? And of course, having all of these plans coming together for the city to then transition. But the question which has become very critical is that of just transition. And obviously, we could be in the same room, but having different experiences in Africa. South Africa, in the city of Tshwane, for example, the issue is that how then do we not leave anyone behind, leveraging off on the implementation of the Paris Agreement, the just transition. For example, if you look at the ILO, guidelines to just transition, decent work, has proven to be quite useful. And of course, the city has to use different mechanisms to say how they do decarbonize. And of course, I want to touch on the issue of regulations. South Africa, for example, municipalities are heavily regulated. And of course, to change, for example, provision of energy from the central a high carbon energy environment, for example, through ESCOM, to decarbonized, decentralized, smart, low carbon energy systems. It's been a mission just to look at how cities can then re-engineer through local bylaws. And of course, what the city of Tshwane can do is different from what the city of Cape Town has done through the program that I've participated, for example, through the energy building program, funded by C40, and also what eThekwini or Durban is doing, because of the different nuances and, of course, the legal uncertainty that has been brought up by the interpretation of the law to say, how then do you provide? Of course, cities have competence in terms of developing and building all of these models and so on, but it's been a challenge. So going back to the issue of then what do we need to do around the issue of decarbonizing? And of course, we realize that in South Africa, you can't have one size fit all. But what has come critical over the years has been the debate around skills that are needed. Technical expertise, can always import it from elsewhere, but in the context of just transition, how do we ensure that we make provision for employees that are going to be affected as we transition to just to clean and probably energy future? And that has presented issues to say probably we need to have an assessment of who we need to identify as skill providers. What are the emerging skills that needs to be filled? And also, how do we then train so that we don't leave everyone behind? So the debate cannot be standardized. If I was to categorize this debate more and even more deeper, is to say that due to these historical and socio-economic challenges, it presents a difficult future. In fact, the future has arrived, but it's distributed very unequally among all the players, and it presents a set of challenges that then needs to be zoomed into differently from probably the global north. And that's experience to share, for example, what Denis was saying and a few others. It's quite interesting to say how then do you view the developmental trajectory and pathways to decarbonize. And of course, if you look at the building portfolio, South Africa, for example, run by public portfolio, the department, it shows that there is more to be done just to measure the efficiency levels of buildings. And of course, how then do you even measure the amount of energy used? Not even smart meters, not even meter those buildings, because resources are not there even to measure. Skills, for example, becomes a key issue, which needs to be embedded throughout. South Africa has developed a just transition framework, which I think makes provision for example, issues like climate, carbon neutrality, and the city has done quite a lot in terms of developing its own plans. But our plans cannot be the same as Cape Town, cannot be the same as the ones in Durban and the ones in eThekwini, for example. Why? Because climates are different. The environmental impact of climate change it cannot be the same because we have different environments going forward. So the debate, I think the Global South looks at a number of aspects that I've said. Of course, you look at policy regulation, the debate around the skills, how to transition in a just way that you don't leave anyone behind, workers and communities alike. Thank you so much, Raphael.
Thank you very much, Stanley. Now, I see, Holger, you've been had your name up for a long time, so I will give now the floor to you. But I will then also suggest to our audience that they prepare their own questions, because I would like also to get a couple from you in case you're having something crossing your mind. So, Holger, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Raphael, and all colleagues that have basically put so many important points on the table. I tried to bring things from my perspective with the city perspective in alignment what are some of the big challenges that have been discussed and that actually are also very much of concern for my organization and our member cities that we represent here as well. And thank you very much for introducing the just transition aspect, which is a very, very important one. And I believe that this is also one that is of global concern, and it brings really Africa and Europe actually also very close. I mean, we have the discussion in the European context very much in the context of old industrial regions, coal-intensive regions that need to be transformed, and these are definitely hotspots of transformation, but at the same time also hotspots of the social challenges that exactly you address or you have addressed in your talk as well. So we see similar phenomena here also in the European context. You talk about leave no one behind, which is a very, very important aspect, but also what we see in the European context more and more is, how shall I phrase it, to not be without diplomacy here. There is also an element to leave no one get away with what they do. We have actually a talk here in the European context also that it is, of course, the richer part, the more wealthy part of the society that is usually also connected to higher level of emissions, GHG emissions, because of their lifestyles, as opposed to those that are not having as much the opportunity. And this brings us very much also back to the leave no one behind and just transition aspects. And this is very much a political discussion here as well. If we want to maintain the pathway towards climate neutrality, we need to ensure that we will not run in societal or social battles exactly for that point that you made, and we need to find better ways to integrate the activities and allow for people to buy in this transformation. And this, I believe, is a challenge that remains unsolved in this very moment. The second challenge that I believe we have discussed here to a certain extent, and this is also still to be solved, is the knowledge economy, which is a very important element. And let's not forget, Research and Innovation Horizon Europe is, at the end of the day, also an economic development program, right? So we invest lots of money, taxpayers' money, into driving research towards innovation, and it should be at service, of course, for social development as well, societal development as well. But we have not managed to close the knowledge value chain, if I may say so, which is potentially the part of the knowledge economy that you have addressed, both Rachel and Ted as well. So I believe that we are very good at the driving innovation part, but potentially the valorization is missing here. Of course, applied science plays an important role in that, but also your university will not be able to forward advice to 80,000 cities and towns in Europe. So I think we need to find some other ways also to share the knowledge that is generated by means of academia, science, research engaging in that agenda, on purpose for the transformation, of course, which is also important because you work also for your own interest. Credits you will receive for your publications and not for advising cities for their transformation. So we have a challenge here as well. But I believe personally, and there is also my second life, that standards can help. You have addressed standards, and I believe standards can help to provide references for methodologies, for solutions, and also for processes. This is something to be explored. I do believe that research can much better engage also in the exploitation part of research and innovation, which brings innovation to market or to application. So that is, in my view, the second aspect. The third is the financing. We still look at the financing exercise here as a financing by projects. You have wonderfully elaborated on the dimension, the scale that we need to arrive at, not to talk about the pace. But if we really engage private sector in the financing, also Veolia colleagues, of course, I look at you, in individual projects, we will never make the race towards 2030, right? So we need to come to a different perspective. And this perspective might be that we finance by program. The CCC, the Climate City contract with the action and investment plan, might actually be a very good starting point for that. But we need then also to align the financing programs, actually both in the public sphere but also by private sector, to not finance the individual project, but potentially feed into a regional facility or local facility and let the 112 and 256 and 80,000 cities decide on their priorities. This could be a revolving fund, it could be replenished, it could give money back to private sector, it could actually create also the size of, or the scale for the investment that is interesting also for the private sector actors. So there is things that we need to do, obviously also on the financing side of things. I stop here.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask from the audience if there are any questions that you would like to move to our panelists. Don't be shy. We're between friends. It's all good. Well, we have a question here. Do we have a mic? Thank you.
Thank you. Simon Pickard, Science Business. I just wanted to come back on this question of measurements and the data, because I'm sure it's of critical importance to the Commission, also in terms of evaluating the impact and the performance of the different initiatives that you're funding. You're all plugged into different ecosystems and communities. Gareth, you're pan-European. David, you're European International. Elsevier's global publisher, global companies, etc. So do you feel that you're able to capture the right kind of data and how that can advise the Commission, national governments and other city authorities on the best way forward? You have your concrete demonstration projects. Gareth, you're looking at systems perspective. Can you advise digital and environment and transport and procurement and so forth? How can you make sense of all of this to be able to deliver simple messages and evidence to policymakers to say, this is where we should try more, do better, forget and drop because it doesn't work in the short, medium, long term, however you frame it. So any thoughts that you have as a group on how to interpret the data that you get and translate that into advice for future action? That would be very interesting.
So a lot of people want to talk, but I will start with Gareth.
So I'm very lucky to work on the third pillar of Horizon Europe, and we're about making money and taking great innovation and making cash. And we're not embarrassed about that. We will not be able to afford our social welfare system in Europe unless we have a growing economy. Let's remember we've paid for multiple framework programs, and we've seen Europe drop down on the top enabling technologies. So we can consume cash. We just don't seem to be getting the results we need. So the data, getting lost in the methodology, getting lost in, and we've talked today, everybody brought up the systemic innovation and the challenges, the long-term planning, the complexity of the finance, the social justice angles, the power and the governance of it. If you were a city, you would be completely disempowered by this. Because you basically I want my bins collected regularly, and they're now saying that with the challenges of the costs of it, I can only get my organic refuse on this. They want to say, why can't I park in the city? So we are all Europeans. We're Brussels people. We know this nonsense. And it's our own language, and we're comfortable with it. But my feeling working with the cities, and I go out a lot, we need to bolster those very people who are doing the contract, we need to give them a positive experience in the short term so they'll deal with the complexity. And I think if the one message is, let's not get lost in the metrics, the methodologies, let's go, okay, we know they're doing it, these are competent people, let's give them some good positive experiences in the short term, because we don't change opinion and arguing with our citizens or the mayor. We change when they have an experience. That's what changes them. Some of the wonderful things we've seen, it's happening literally 4 to 6 months. You all know Barcelona's wonderful superblock system. So in 2017, I worked on the first superblock. All these people campaigning, we want our traffic. Don't you dare take this away from us. And after it was implemented, all those signs and the demonstrations gone because everybody loved it. And all the other neighborhoods wanted campaigning to get the next investment to block their streets. The businesses, they made more money. Crime went down. And the wonderful thing is, see in the superblock, when you see a father playing with his son on the square, there's a microsocial interaction, which is they benefit from that experience. But me walking to work, that makes me feel good. And that's called a microsocial positive interaction. So that father and son is going to impact 50 people as they walk by, and they'll all be like, those superblocks, they're really good. Okay? So it's not going to be the carbon cost and the sacrifice. So I would be keen that we all try and hold back the complexity from the city. Let's try and protect some of these people and give them some nice experiences. And we might have to use some cash for it, and some of it might fail, but that's okay, because innovation does fail sometimes. But I would be keen that we do want the matrix, and we'll work on those things. But let's give them a positive experience.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to get very short comments from all the people with their names on, and then probably leave to Philippe a few minutes to also help us wrap up and close the session. So we'll go in order. I think, Markus, you have your name up for a long time, but please, just to be the timekeeper, please keep it short.
Okay, I try to. First, I want also to confirm what Holger said before, and maybe it's a part answer of the question of the audience, that I also think that we know a lot of single solutions and measurements, but we still, what I mentioned already before, know not much enough about all the connections between. So that's, for me, a point of more research, maybe in Horizon Europe, for example, or other fields. But what we also need is to make the pace. Yeah? We have to fasten up, we have to reduce bureaucracy. And maybe to have a suggestion is that also the EU could be simplify a framework and approval procedures for that. Yeah, that to simplify, just to simplify and to fasten up. If we are talking about procedures from authorities, we are not talking about weeks, we are talking about months, sometimes years. And that's where we lose the time. We are always losing time. It's not that we are not good enough in some fields, we are too slow. We are just too slow. And finally, the third aspect, I will make it really short, Rafaela, is all the local levels, municipalities, they have also year plans about at least 5 years. Everything is fixed. So, and some of the teachers are also really poor. They don't have the money for investment in the infrastructure to do some things. And that could be also maybe a way for fostering for funding with EU money. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Now, I will give the word to Rachel, but David, Denis, and Gareth, please don't hold a grudge on me if you will not have the time to talk. I see that Paloma and Philippe had put their names on, so I will give them the opportunity to close the roundtable. There will be networking after the roundtable, so I will be more than happy to hear your thoughts afterwards. But Rachel, please.
Yeah, don't hold a grudge against me either. No, just maybe to respond to the data question. I think our data at the moment's in silos. I speak from my perspective. We know a lot about the research and innovation in terms of research output. I'm really curious from everyone around this roundtable as what could that be matched to? We've looked at it from an SDG perspective. We've looked at it from a pattern perspective. We can map it in terms of a city approach. You know, how can that data be best used? How can we work together? I think collaboration is really going to be the key here. And I think aligning some of those data sources, I'm really curious about, you know, could we potentially look at research output and GHG emissions going down? Is there a linkage there? You know, these are really exciting areas, and you know, we're open for collaborating on that.
Thank you very much. So, Philippe, I will give now the floor to you, if you would like to say a couple of remarks, and maybe Paloma to conclude the roundtable afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to come back on some of the points that were raised by the previous speakers, maybe starting with citizens' engagement. We have been talking a lot about citizens' engagement, and I should remind you that the original title of the cities mission was 100 climate neutral cities by and for the citizens. We removed that last part of the title because we thought it was too long, which shows that the Commission is never very political, too many engineers probably, but it's a very important part and component of the mission. This is in the DNA of that mission, to engage with citizens, because it goes without saying, as most of you have said, we will not make it without the citizens. And I have to say that when we prepared the mission, when we were developing the concept of the mission, we had quite many interactions and exchanges with citizens across Europe. And I was pleasantly surprised to see the commitment, the interest of those citizens in these countries. And they were all very willing to move forward, to do things, to change their behavior. Just to give you an example, they are willing to get rid of their cars as long as they get infrastructures in return from their cities, as long as they can use a safe bicycle lane to go to work, as long as they have a bus going home in the evening when they go to the cinema or the theater. So they are ready to make efforts as long as the cities provide them with the right infrastructures. And I think this is something which should be always in the back of our mind. The other point I wanted also to make regarding the model and whether there is the unique model or a main model that we should be using, certainly not, of course. And I would go even one step further. Putting at the disposal of cities solutions that have been the result of past projects is not enough, because they will not be able to use those solutions. You can have as many portals, one-stop shop platforms as you want. You will not get the cities to use these solutions because they need to be adapted to the needs of that city. What you need in return is to have the possibility for cities to exchange their experience with other cities. And we do that in the cities mission, in the mission platform. We have calls for pilot projects, which give an opportunity for cities to develop their solutions and to share and to exchange the results with other cities. We have twinning calls, which one of them closed very recently, where we can have even more cities involved in the cities mission that go beyond the 100 cities that we are targeting. And that actually applies also to countries and cities that are in third countries. And here I should make a little bit of publicity. We have another mission. There is always a mission hidden behind one mission in Europe. And that mission is a mission of mission innovation, which is an initiative, a global initiative, which is called the Urban Transition Mission, where we are actually developing a network of cities across the globe, which involves cities from the global south, where we want also to reflect and share experience on the development of strategy for climate neutrality. And there is a call out there that is open, that will close in November. So for those of you that have an interest in taking part in this urban transition mission, I can provide them with all the necessary information. Maybe one last point on the just transition and the inclusivity. It's also one of the main element of the cities mission, because again, we should not do this transition, this green and digital transition in cities without the support of the entirety of the population, and we should not exclude parts of the population just because they don't have the means and the resources to follow that. And that is something that is very clear. I mean, I am confident that it will work, because at the end of the day, the people in charge are the local authorities. And unlike us around the table, they can be voted out. So they have an interest in making sure that what they do responds to the needs of their citizens.
Yes, indeed. Paloma, please.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to wrap up on my side with sharing of some information on a report that the Court of Auditors recently released on smart cities. And in fact, you know, they basically said from what they have seen in the projects that the European Union is managing, well, okay, the European Commission or CINEA is managing, is that these projects from an innovation perspective are delivering on the results that they have been asked to deliver. So they are doing well. What they see, and some of the issues have been raised here, is more on the replication and the scale up of those. And they have done a kind of survey with some of the cities and some other stakeholders to understand where the problems are. And I think that you have pointed to some of them. I mean, we are talking about regulatory problems, so legal uncertainties. We have talked about sometimes lack of funding. I mean, they estimate, hundreds of billions of euros to make these European cities basically green cities, and this funding is not clear that is there. Some of them has to come from national or regional government, some others can be private finance. There is also still, even if there is some positive involvement on the citizens' engagement. Some citizens seem to be engaged until the point that now it's me who has to make the effort. Whether there are alternatives that are provided by the cities, well, I want to take my bicycle. Do we have bicycle lanes, or do you ask me to, drive in the middle of the huge traffic? That's another, story. So also how we battle this citizens' engagement, no? And also, issues regarding, planning or late permits who are maybe not, is an obstacle more on the timing. So there is also issues there. And that's where we all need, whether the European Commission, whether, agencies with the funding, where all the stakeholders can work together to make these cities net zero in the future.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone. It's 3 minutes before 5, but I think I also need to give a couple of information from the organization side. So thank you for joining. There will be a networking cocktail just waiting for you outside of the room, sponsored by Quantum Delta. But also, if you're here today, it means that you can be here tomorrow. And tomorrow we will be talking about another set of very important topics. We will have sustainable aviation, we will have green finance, and we will have eventually a wrap-up session at the end of the day, where we will look at climate policy and how we can actually have an influence over our net zero, let's say, dreams and hopes. So you're all invited to come along. Thank you very much for being here today, to all the speakers, to the audience. And, well, as citizens, let's hope that our cities will be net zero in the future.
Very interesting.
Thank you very much for coming along today.
Balance of the people in the country.
No, indeed, and I'm very happy.
We should have more of those workshops on this subject, because I think this is the sector.